Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. We're, a little late, but who really cares?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm not saying whose fault it is,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't my fault.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't.
Uh-huh.
I mean, okay, the last like 2 minutes were my fault.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, so it was part my fault. So I'll share the blame. I'll take. You know what? I'll take it. Fine, I'll take it. Go ahead, put it on me.
Uh-huh.
Put it on me. I'll take
Okay.
it. So, how are you?
I'm getting there.
Well, that's good.
Mm.
End of the
Always.
week, at least.
I, yeah, it's that. It is indeed that.
So, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Got another week coming. Yay.
It seems to work that way, doesn't it?
It often,
What is
you
with
know,
that?
I don't know.
Ah,
I know, God, I said
Garrett,
that.
don't let me mislead anybody. I am not an anarchist, but I figure since we're talking about a classic of
You don't work for a corporation. You don't work for the state. You have drawn together a group of people who support you in your endeavors and provide you with the resources that you need. That seems pretty anarchistic to me.
By the way, Garrett says, "Yet, don't hold your breath, buddy." I'm just saying. I don't want you to. I don't want you to set yourself up for
You
disappointment.
formed a syndicate, Steve. You have a syndicate, and you even have like a shiny, plaque of officialdom.
That is true, but I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I mean, that there's more necessary than that to believe that anarchism as a workable model for how to arrange a society is valid. I mean,
Yes, I think
I
skill is.
agree that I do all of the things you've just said, but I mean, I also think there ought to be like governments and stuff. So I mean, I feel like by definition I'm not an anarchist.
Governments and you just live like one.
I suppose, but see, that's the thing. By you can
Steve, if everybody just lived like anarchists, I would be perfectly fine with them not agreeing with anarchism. That would be great. That would be so peachy with me.
yeah. So anyway, speaking of anarchism,
Emerlian, that
yeah,
depends. Do they employ others? Do they sustain hierarchy? Steve just works by himself. I
that's
mean,
true.
well, I mean, there's sort of a de facto hierarchy in the Ensign's log because it's
Oh
Jason
no,
Cho.
there's yeah.
But that's an excellent example of a justifiable hierarchy. Like we're helping, but he's the one really doing the work. So he has, and he's the one kind of creating the ideas for the show. Plus, when we get ideas and we say, hey, how about this? Sort of it is cooperative in that sense. So
Yes, and I mean I don't have employees, but I have collaborated with people in the past and been in the sort of superior position in the hierarchy because it's my video and I mean I try to be and I think you would agree because we've worked on stuff together. Like I try to be as collaborative as possible, and I'm very open
absolutely,
to
I just
ideas and
you
suggest. I mean, I'm definitely not a do it this way type of guy. But it's still my call ultimately. Like it's still my video, and I'm still the one who's going to decide how it goes. So I mean, there is a degree of hierarchy there.
exactly like I said, justifiable.
Yeah. I'm glad you think so. I hope other people who have collaborated with me in that way agree with you. I think they do. I don't think I've had a falling out with anybody I've ever collaborated with.
If they have, you apparently don't know about it, so they, should have been a little bit more open.
It's not my fault they didn't speak up. Yeah. So
I don't know.
anyway, yeah.
He's Uh-oh. No, where'd it go? It went away.
What are you thinking of?
No, he's not the boss. He's just the big shot.
Ah, I had to be a big shot, didn't I?
Didn't you just had to.
I had to open up my mouth. So anyway, shall we talk about this book that we're reading?
Chapter 12.
Chapter 12 of 13. There's only one chapter left after this.
Chapter, Steve.
Indeed, penultimate, meaning right before the ultimate one.
Uh-huh. So it's not actually ultimate.
It's not the ultimate chapter.
But it's fun to say.
So that means the ultimate warrior was the last warrior. And the guy before him was the penultimate warrior. So I guess Carrie Von Erich was the penultimate warrior. And then the ultimate warrior.
The guy who what?
Carrie Von Erich. The modern day warrior. But he was right before the ultimate warrior. So he would be the penultimate warrior.
So he was right before him?
Well, not right before, but he was probably the guy right before, the most prominent wrestler to have warrior in his nickname before the ultimate warrior. So, yeah.
Possibly. I don't know. I don't know that would have scanned quite as well with the wrestling crowds.
Probably not. I don't know if they would. Yeah, if they would have called him the penultimate warrior, there would have been a lot of, gaping mouths and perplexed stares. He's the what? What'd they call him? The Pan something warrior. The Pan warrior. Come on, Pan warrior.
Pass me another beer.
One of my favorite memories of going to a live wrestling show ever is there was a wrestler on the card named Switchblade, and somebody in the crowd, I don't know if this, I only saw the guy once and he was like an indie guy, so I don't know if this was like a common thing for his matches, but somebody in the crowd, and it's not that like hard of a joke to write. I mean, lots of people could have come to it like independently, but instead of saying Switchblade, they called him Butter Knife. And there was like a guy sitting, 2 or 3 people down from me in the stands, and he was like, I mean, he loved that. As soon as somebody, he was.
I thought you meant I thought he was going to get super fun. No, his name is Switchblade. Okay?
Oh no, because Switchblade was a heel, so we were supposed to like boo him and jeer him. And this dude, I mean, he like stood up and he was screaming at the top of his lungs for the entire match. Hey, Butter Knife!
Oh,
so
that's so sweet.
The live independent wrestling experience. Nothing quite like it.
That is the truth.
And Radical Bacon has a good question. Are you as interested in wrestling as I am in D&D? That's a really good question, actually.
The answer to that is no. I am more interested in wrestling than Steve is in D&D.
Because if you're interested in wrestling at all, if you have even a minimal amount of interest in wrestling, then you are more interested in it than D&D.
My stories and things. It's just it's. Who did we decide? Was it Deathstroke? Am I getting some of his personality from Kurt Angle? Was that Deathstroke?
Oh no, I remember us talking about Kurt Angle, but I don't know if it was Deathstroke or not.
Because I was thinking it was, that he was, that sort of inflated arrogance. And I mean, God, Kurt Angle was just like,
oh God, yeah,
one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was so great. I mean, first of all, great athlete.
Oh, terrific wrestler.
Amazing athlete.
Legitimate wrestler.
And then also we said we were talking about parents. And was it that I said I wanted maybe it was that I said I wanted Deathstroke to be short. Not like short, but like Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah. Oh, yes. You did say Eddie Guerrero. Yes. That was the wrestling reference with Deathstroke. You mentioned Eddie Guerrero as a reference for Deathstroke. And I was a little, if you remember that conversation, I was a little like, God, I don't know. I don't really dig this. And then you said like Eddie Guerrero. And I was like, oh, okay.
But, I mean, I really want to work Kurt Angle because just his persona was so great. Yeah. I mean, just so great. Like, but I mean, full of himself, and like he's a wonderful heel, but just like so oblivious to it.
Oh yeah.
Like so full of himself, but not. I mean, sometimes he went the asshole route, but
Oh
usually
sure.
just like he was full of himself, and he's like, I just really am this great, guys.
Yeah,
Obviously,
like what am I supposed to do? I'm this great.
I mean,
Like
and,
what else am I supposed to say?
and at the same time, kind of doofy, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's hard, just so not. I mean, just amazing. And I haven't pulled in Mick Foley yet, but it's gonna happen. I mean, man.
Do you remember or have you ever seen, like in the years since it first aired, the backstage skit with Steve Austin and Kurt Angle, where Austin gave him a cowboy hat, but it was like a little toy children's cowboy hat? And like he put it on his gigantic wrestler head, and it's like this little tiny hat on his head, and he's like standing there with like fucking Buzz Lightyear with his hands on his hips and just like looking real proud. And Steve Austin says, you look like a cowboy. And Kurt just smiles and goes, I feel like a cowboy. And it's just, oh, it's so perfect. It's such a great moment.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Wholesome content.
And yeah, wholesome, but also just like really well crafted. I mean, well crafted story and just well acted. I mean, just
yeah. Well, because it comes from the persona of the wrestlers. I mean, it feels natural because it's built around their personalities. You're not forcing them to do stuff that they can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, Angle seems like he would be an interesting guy to spend some time with. Like the goofballiness, not just like, I mean, he's not over the top goofy, but just that he has sort of a quirky sense of humor and can laugh at himself, and has like been in the freaking Olympics.
Yeah. Well, that's what was cool about him when he was working that persona, when he was sort of the doofy, guy. It's like he's a little bit of a goofball, but you also know like he could like kill you. Like he's legitimately an incredibly, at least back, I think he's kind of beat up and injured now, but I mean he could still beat the shit out of me. I mean, I'm not saying, but like,
I can beat the shit out of you.
Well, that's also true. But I mean, I mean, in his prime, like you could look at.
Still wrestling?
No, he's retired. But he only retired a couple years ago. Okay. I mean,
I'd be curious. I mean, if he's like, I mean, because I think he could be like he could be a public speaker. Like, that kind of thing. He's got he's very charismatic.
Yeah, he could talk. He was a good talker. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, the Dispossessed. Okay, so this is the penultimate chapter. This will be our last flashback chapter.
Oh, I don't know. I think I did tell you. So on Wednesday we had Trek Reluctantly.
Indeed, we did.
We stopped because I had a book group with family book group, and it ended up I got surprised because I was expecting it to be like my cousin Derry Lee and maybe one or two other people, but it turned out that Derry Lee was hanging out with a bunch of the cousins, and she sent the Zoom link to like everybody. So it was like. And my brothers had gone down to where the cousins were, so everybody was in Florida except me. I'm here because I don't have the same spring break as everybody else does.
Right.
And so they all got on, and we're all so it was like a bunch of cousins and my mom and my brothers and Aunt Carol and just like a whole bunch of families. So it was this big group. I was like, oh, it's good to see whatever. Like, and you're talking about fibroids and, politics and vaccinations and all that good stuff. And, but yeah, that would have been before I read the chapter. And so in this one, Bedap is talking to, which one's he talking to? The PDC.
Yeah, like, at the beginning. Yeah, they're having like a meeting. Yeah.
The organizational group.
Yeah.
It's not the government.
No, of course not. Not the government.
Not the government. But they are sort of, interested parties who want to have a say.
Yes. But yeah, exactly. Sure.
And so anyway, and he is talking about the possibility of increasing communication with
Urus. Yeah. And not just that, not just increasing communication, but perhaps welcoming a contingent of Odonians from Urus.
People who call themselves Odonians. I mean,
that's true. They don't know if they're Odonians or not.
Them? Can we trust them? No, of course not. They live on Urus. I mean, they're Urasti. And so anyway, it says, to report an Honoresti managerial debate in full would be difficult. It went very fast. And here's where I started underlining. Several people often speaking at once, nobody speaking at great length, a good deal of sarcasm, a great deal left unsaid, the tone emotional, often fiercely personal. And my margin note is, has she been to my parents' house with my family for a family dinner? Like, well, that's how we talk.
It sounds exactly like that.
The only thing is that was not true was nobody speaking at great length, because we all speak at great length
at the same time
and in connection to each other. It's like, oh my goodness.
I think that's what you said, because you told me, you messaged me about that, and you said, like, all the cousins were there, and, like, you know, my brothers were there, and everybody was there, what I said to you in response to that was, did anybody get out a complete sentence? and you said, oh yeah, lots of them, just all at once.
The way it works. And apparently most people don't communicate like that.
No. Well, because I mean, you know, I've told you before, like, if nothing else, I admire your tenacity, because if I'm ever in a conversation like that and, like, everybody's talking at once, like, I just stop talking. Like, I'm not gonna talk over people. I'm not gonna try to talk over people. I'll just stop talking. And if it keeps up like that, I mean, if there's not another reason for me to be there, I'll just leave.
You'll leave without saying goodbye.
I'll just leave. Yeah, because it's like, this, okay, I don't need to be here. You know? Like,
oh my goodness.
But yeah, so that's what this meeting of the PDC is like.
Random Geek says it's like a patron hangout.
It is. I mean,
except you, I've never seen you just get up and, like, walk.
Well, I don't no, but I do. I mean, I don't try to talk over people. I mean, I do. You know, and plus it's only an hour. You know, I can stick around for an hour, and I like everybody. You know, I mean, it's not like there's a bunch of people that I don't know and don't give a shit about, AKA my family.
I know how rare my family situation is, and I'm perpetually grateful that I get along, that I actually enjoy the company of everybody in my family. Oh
yeah, it is. I mean, well, and not, yeah, the enjoy the company thing is crucial, because, like, I mean, I can't think of anybody in my family that I, like, genuinely dislike.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like, except for like my dad and my brother, all the rest of them, like, I'm like, I could take or leave them. Like, I don't wish him any harm. I don't hold anything against him. But if the pitch is, hey, you want to go hang out with your cousins? No, I'm good.
Yes. We'll all talk at the same time. We'll go to the beach. It'll be hang out and we'll have food. Yay! Look at all the pictures. Who the hell is that? Don't know.
Exactly.
Old family videos. The story is that my aunts and uncles, when my grandfather got a movie camera, grandma said, okay, it's a movie camera, so move. And so they would run across the yard, turn around and smile and wave, and then run to the other side of the yard, turn around and smile and wave. You followed with the camera.
Your family was rediscovering, like, the earliest days of cinema, like the Lumiere brothers, where they would, like, make these movies, and the first commercially exhibited films were like man washing horse, train arriving at station, and it's like, oh, they just filmed some shit that was happening.
Because it was completely new. So, and then there spoke the opponent, made up dreaded the cool, intelligent woman named Rulok. Dun,
yes.
dun, dun.
And if that name sounds familiar,
it should. That means actually that means that you do not have my superpower.
Actually, can I confess? I knew we had seen her before, but I forgot who she was.
Ah.
until it is explained later in the chapter. Yeah, but I read the name and I was like Rulag, we've seen her before. Who the fuck is that? And then I was like,
How did you miss it? Because she had been his cleverest enemy all year in council. He glanced at Shevik. Like, now Bedab doesn't know.
Bedab doesn't know, right? He's just glancing at Shevik because
right, but Le Guin, I mean, like, I'm like, oh, he looks at Shevik. Like, I thought he knew.
Right. Yeah. See, I didn't get it at that point. I just figured because he's looking. Bedab doesn't know yet, and he's just kind of looking at Shevik like, get a load of this one, like kind of looking at.
He draws attention to her.
Yeah.
Shevik's already noticed.
Yeah, Shevik. I'm sure Shevik noticed.
Yeah.
Like, great.
Her arguments were good, and Bedab respected her. Sometimes when she spoke of the strength of Urus, and the danger of I underlined this, the danger of bargaining with the strong from a position of weakness, he believed her. Mm-hmm. And the note that I put was power still matters and exists in an anarchistic society. So,
well, yes, of course it does. Of course it does.
But I mean, the anarchists and the ones who are sort of saying against, we don't want these additional people here, or we don't want any additional communication.
Right.
They're being extra cautious because they're aware of that. Oh, excuse me.
You're okay.
A long week.
I don't doubt it. Rulag is there, and the sentiment of the group seems to be very, very strongly against Bedap and Shevik and people of their like mind. Like, no, it's overwhelmingly people do not want. They don't want Erasti, even Erasti who claim that they're Odonians, to come to Anaris. Like, they don't want to. They don't.
They've been raised in among proprietarians. It's all they know.
Well, and also there is, I kind of chuckled at this. I guess this is another one of the exceptions to their philosophy that they have to allow because otherwise it wouldn't work. They have there's the what they call the closure of the settlement agreement, which was established when the first settlers arrived on Anaris. Which is that's sort of the you get the impression it's like the closest thing to like a constitution that they have, because they like to wank themselves off by saying like, we don't have laws, but they have the closure of the settlement agreement, which basically says, okay, no more people on Anaris, no more visitors from Urus or from anywhere else. Like, people from off planet aren't allowed to move beyond the walls of the port that we saw in the very first chapter. Like, that's where the off-worlders can be, and they can't go beyond that. Like, they can't come out into broader society. And that's been the way it's been for however long Anaris has been there, 100 and some years. And they don't want to change that. They're like, nope.
I have a question going back earlier when Rulag is talking, because I think I've got a typo in mine, and I'm curious if you have a digital copy, right?
Yes.
I'm curious if it's in yours too.
Okay.
The paragraph starts with laudable curiosity, Rulag said, and they're talking about how dangerous it is, and she said the danger lies in the act of finding out. And of course, we know the one who goes to find out is Shevik. And
indeed.
But she stands up, indicating, "I got more to say." And Bedap's like, "Oh crap!"
That's one of my favorite moments in the chapter, because I can visualize that so perfectly. Like, Bedap, he's like, "Oh, here we go."
All right, get ready. And it says he glanced against at Shevik, which presumably means he glanced again at Shevik.
Yeah, mine says glanced again.
Okay,
yeah, so that must have, it was corrected for this edition. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Garrett, absolutely, and I think that's one of the things we both like about it.
There
is no perfect implementation of any, theoretical or aspirational society. Implementation is always going to have flaws. That's part of implementation. It happens.
it's definitely one of the things that I like the best about the book, and it is the thing that makes the book tolerable to me as someone who doesn't really buy anarchism as a workable model. The fact, because that keeps it from coming across as didactic for the most part. We talked about in the previous chapter, there were some parts in the previous chapter that I felt came across as didactic, or at least were a lot more didactic than it had been, and I kind of rolled my eyes. And there, there are the parts, in throughout the book when the Odonians are,
I would be curious to see what you thought of what's it? My favorite utopian, actually the only utopian story that I like, Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy, which is very totally a freaking panegyric to socialism, but it doesn't it comes across as like shiny eyes in an anime, and just like it really does. It doesn't come across as like super. I'm sure it's didactic in parts. Plus, it's really short. And I mean, it just like when I was doing the survey that I did with whoever it was who was doing the research on different people and people who identify as various types of socialists and what their views are. And I said, "Have you read Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy?" He said, "Yes." And I'm like, "Isn't it just the cutest thing?" I just want to go back in time and give him a hug and say, "We're not gonna make it, buddy, but
bless your heart."
Bless your heart. He's just so hopeful. He's just so hopeful. Bless his little heart. Oh my goodness. And then the end of that paragraph, I underlined some more. And as Rulag spoke, Beda noticed that though she was addressing him, she kept glancing at Shevek.
Yeah.
And she says, "Your syndicate of initiative."
Emphasizing the pronoun.
Now, there's nothing in the text.
No, it says your syndicate of initiative, she said, emphasizing the pronoun.
Oh, I hadn't got that far. Yes. So yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that, but I was just like, you can it's that phrase is unnecessary. Just because she includes the your, she's like, your syndicate of initiative, because it ain't mine. Yeah. I got nothing to do with that. I think it's a bad idea. I want to be really clear on this.
Well, and also it's also been established that they try to avoid personal pronouns.
Which is interesting. There were a couple places in this chapter that I was like, how does this phrase, we'll get to those. How does this phrase work? This phrase is like self-contradictory. So they were really interesting.
Yeah.
And she says, what's the difference, you'll say, between talking to a few Arashi on the shortwave and talking to a few of them here in Abernay? What's the difference? What's the difference between a shut door and an open one? She's going.
She's going for it.
And he goes, Shevek? Shevek's like, well, there's the question of sending an RSD to Eurus. Oh,
they don't like that either.
The terms of the settlement don't. I'm fine.
Okay, I'm not sure. I mean, if it's there's nothing I can do about it. So, it is what it is. We'll just have to.
Folks on the chat.
You can hear me, okay?
Okay. Well, guess what? So, yes, I can hear you.
Hear me and see me and
stuff?
No, through for you.
Sneeze. So, bless you in advance. Okay. Well, I can see you, but it's just that one picture. There is still your smiling face. Is still there.
At least that's good.
So, they're talking about. Jalen says retell.
I don't.
There's a delay.
Do you want me to try it?
Because it's also the Zoom.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think this is an XSplit problem. This is. It's my. I mean, it is spotty for some reason.
Okay.
It won't help, but let me stop. Let me stop there's a delay. Sorry. Let me. Okay, let's try this again. Hi again, everybody. I still think there's a delay because you said God knows like Can you still hear me and see me and everything?
That's there.
I think it's well, but I mean, usually it can. It's there's something wrong with my service. Like usually it can because we've done this a bunch of times before, obviously, and it's been fine. So it's just
Right, but
it's a connection
I'm saying
problem.
when we let the stream drop, when we let the stream drop, and then we came back and it was just us on Zoom for a little bit. It took about 30 or 40 seconds, and then we were able to talk.
Right. Well, yeah, because we weren't streaming, we were just talking on Zoom.
Right. So it seems like everything together is the issue. But now
it seems okay now, doesn't it?
Cross fingers. Look at that. Let's go for it, man.
Just go. Yeah, just go ahead. Just go for it.
Okay, so Shevik had just started up and was talking about the possibility of sending an anarchism to Urus, and said that it wasn't forbidden by the way their society had been set up. The terms of settlement don't forbid it. And then he said to forbid it now would be an assumption of authority by the PDC.
Ooh.
And exactly. That's literally like here.
That's what you said?
Underline it and wrote, ooh, them's fight words.
God, what a bunch of jerk-offs. I just...
Why? Because they take their values seriously.
Because their values are ridiculous. I like Badap a lot, and I like Shevik, but these people are jerk offs. All they do, they love to fucking whack them. They love to wank themselves off with how independent they are and how free they are. And I'm just like, I'm making this every time an Odonian starts going off about how great their fucking society is. I'm doing this. I'm just like, you are a bunch of jerk offs.
No wonder you enjoy reading this book so much.
It's, you know what? Oh, a nice long chapter.
So Rulag is the one who says, yeah, he can go, he just can't come back.
Right, because
she says, nobody is allowed off of the freight ships farther than the boundary of the port of Benares. That's gonna ring. Do you want me to get that and hang up on him, or do you want it?
It's fine. Whatever.
Okay. So anyway, so they can't come off of that, and I'm just like, but could he just stay there and have people bring him stuff, and he can set up a camp in the port?
Yeah, he'll just live in the port. He can't go beyond the wall. And they start saying, well, of course, that was meant to apply to Urasti, not on Oresti. And Rulag says, anybody coming from Urus is an Urasti. Right. Very, very, very uncompromising.
Yeah. So, did Garrett, what did Garrett say that was right? I don't know. What did Garrett say? Oh. The chapters that have Shevik working on the Desert Dirt crew with such limited supplies illustrate that. Also, when the headman assumes credit for Garrett's work, or for Shevik's ideas. What did Garrett say? I missed it.
I don't know.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know.
At this point, I'm confused. Okay. Oh, and then when they're all going back and forth, and the young man with the North Rising accent,
this guy.
If you come sneaking back, there's going to be some of us there, some real Odonians. And I marked that and put, it sounds familiar.
You know what he's doing? Literally, he's gatekeeping.
Gasp. And, he's yelling right at Bedap, and Bedap says, you don't mean justice, you mean punishment. And Rulag says he means violence. Yeah. And if there's violence, you will have caused it. You and your syndicate. And you will have deserved it.
Oh, yeah, and then someone else stands up to shut her up by quoting from some Odo.
Free your mind of the idea of deserving, the idea of earning. and you will be able to think. And that is something that line hit me pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that, they're specifically talking in terms of, eating and,
Right.
but, what comes to mind for me is, respect, kindness, and those sorts of things that, well, what do I have to do to be cared about? It's
Right.
like the fact that you think it works that way is a problem. The fact that you have experienced things that have led you to think that you have to earn kindness from people makes me frustrated.
Yeah. Well,
of anger.
because I mean, when you make things like that transactional, you undercut the whole nature of it. I mean, it's not an act of kindness if you have to do something first in order to deserve it, then that's not, it's a transaction, and not everything should be a transaction. And especially things
but not everything should be a transaction. And that raises the question of, well, what should and why?
And that's an important conversation for a society to have. But I would argue that, the basics that every human being needs in order to not only survive, but to lead, have a quality of life, should not be things that are necessarily transactional. We should cover the basics, and in personal lives. I mean, it's obviously something you need to, it depends on who you choose to have in your life. But I mean, if I had people in my life, if I was surrounded by people who made me feel like I had to constantly earn basic respect or earn love and acceptance and, things like that, then hopefully I would eventually wake up and realize, oh shit, I should get different people.
Yeah.
I should surround myself with different people, because those things shouldn't have to be earned. There are certain things that everybody should just, and you're not, I mean, it's like, it's, you and I have talked about this before. Like there should be a baseline of respect, of like human dignity, that everybody gets. Even if you're the biggest asshole in the world, everybody gets a baseline of human respect.
Just for being a person.
Just for being a person. Yeah, you have your, that means, that you have your rights are protected. That people aren't allowed to take advantage of you without facing some repercussion. That, you're not, you won't be subjected to discrimination or to the kind of indignities that people are made to suffer just because they fall into a category that somebody else doesn't like, like that. Those things should be guarantees that everybody gets, even if you're, Jeff Bezos. Like you can be the biggest asshole in the world and you still get those guarantees.
I don't know, Steve. I mean, you're driving a hard bargain there.
Look, I'm not saying it would.
Dragons people, though.
I'm not saying. And here's another important distinction. I'm not saying I would shed a tear if somebody ran him over with a truck. I'm just saying, legally speaking, he's entitled to not be run over by a truck.
But was it a nice truck?
Well, if it was, hopefully he didn't leave too big of a dent in the grill, or it's something that they can get fixed pretty easily.
A qualified body shop nearby.
Yeah. Who will donate the labor? Like, oh, you're the guy? Oh, no, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you.
And so Shevik, so the guy who quotes Oda, everybody's like, oh no. And everybody kind of quiets down for a bit. And then Shevik is like, oh, there's silence.
Yeah.
I must say a thing.
I'll talk.
If an individual can't work in solidarity with his fellows, it is his duty to work alone. What we've been saying more and more often, you must work with the others. You must accept the rule of majority, but any rule is tyranny. The duty of the individual is to accept no rule, to be the initiator of his own acts, to be responsible. And then the revolution is in the individual spirit, or it is nowhere. Which reminded me Wasn't that in oh, I can see her face and I don't actually know her name. Gorman, the youth poet who spoke at the inauguration.
Oh, yes.
It's
What?
similar to a line from her poem.
And wasn't that a line that you mentioned that you said, because when I got to this,
I used it. I used it as a comment response.
yes, I remember that line sounded familiar. Yeah.
Yes, and I said because
You
I
said
told
it's in
you
this
about
chapter. Yeah.
because somebody was saying, essentially, how can people who call themselves anarchists, how can they work with liberals? And I'm like, because we live in an anarchist society and some of the people around us are liberal. And sometimes when we are helping people, liberals are also willing to help.
Right.
That
Well, and I mean, it's a pretty good statement of the philosophy that you have, the way you have described your personal approach to anarchism.
that it is an individual thing.
That if people don't, if individual people aren't persuaded that it's the way to go,
then it's not the way to go.
It's never going to happen. Yeah. Yeah. And even as a non-anarchist, like I can't really argue with that. I mean, I could, but I mean, just as a practical matter, like, and unless you are talking about like, forcing it on people, which then you're not an anarchist, practically speaking. Like, I mean, you might call yourself an anarchist, but if you're like imposing some new order on people that don't want it, then you're not an anarchist,
And then I also underline when they're talking. He's talking with Rulag, as quiet. She says it as quietly as he, but very coldly. Their eyes met for a second. Both looked down. I'm like, oh, dramatic moment. Oh. So yeah. Oh, and long dramatic pauses.
That's right. That's how you know it's important.
What? With intensity. So that's from a Taylor Molly poem. I could be a poet, ironically. So they head out, and Shivik is talking about Sabal to Badab. He says, Sabal sent me one of his toenail clippings.
Yeah, that's what a great line.
It is, and then he continues, "What's on his mind?" And I was just like, "What the heck?" So in like 2 sentences, we've got 2 personal pronouns. Possessive personal pronouns.
Yeah.
His toenail clippings, his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then Badap replies, "What's on that woman Rulag's mind, I wonder?" I'm like,
more possessive language.
Possessive nouns. And then like the 2 paragraphs down below, I'll talk myself purple about it, and Badap's like, I don't want to go. If I had to do it, by damn, I'd slit my throat. And I circled that. This time, instead of underlining it, I circled it and I wrote, is this just carelessness? Like, are they like, is it because they've just left this meeting where they've been defending their ideas very carefully and thinking about it? I'm like, or is this like, is this deliberate?
Maybe, I mean, maybe it's just Le Guin kind of slipping.
Yeah,
but,
or
I mean,
like, did she try to make it work with like in the more Odonian style, and just like, yeah, that sounds. It
just doesn't say. Well, I mean, and of course, I go right to, it's because the whole no personal pronouns thing is a silly affectation that these people. One more silly thing that these people love to wank themselves off with.
But then, right later, it's I'll meet you at the room.
Yeah, and also when we learn who Rulag is, she is the mother. Like Takfur
more than
speaks with like, the lack of personal pronouns.
The back and forth was in like a fraction of the page. We were using personal pronouns and possessive pronouns and possessive nouns, and all of a sudden we get to just an article.
We're back to normal. Yeah.
Like, okay, so it was kind of disorienting. And Pillin's okay. I heard some people saying that they thought the baby had died, but baby did not die. And then, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. They're talking with Tokver.
Yeah.
Although I don't think Shevik's with him, because I think he went back. He continued.
Shevik went to pick up Sadiq.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so Badab goes on to the house, and something he said with Tokver, Yeah, exactly, and yeah, kind of, but at the same time, it's I thought it was more of a principle than that. So, anyway, Badap says of the back and forth, he says, I'm at PDC a lot, but that's a special situation. I expect opposition there because I create it.
Right.
Like, and I'm like, you can be ready for it, but like how it's so stressful when you know there's opposition all around you, and you're just like, oh, I mean, that's oh gosh, it's what it's like teaching an honors class.
You know what that feels like, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, at some point, some parent's going to be like, my child is not a B student. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. They're not just going to ask you, what can you tell me about this assignment? What's your purpose here? What are you trying to do? They don't ask that way. No. It's confrontational, and you're not entirely sure which assignment it's going to happen with, but it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't be ready for it all the time because it's exhausting. But if you're not ready for it all the time, it just like smacks you. It hits you,
yeah.
And then you're not ready for it. And if you are ready for it all the time, you're stressed out and exhausted all the time, but then when they come for you, you are ready for it. So, and so Tokver's talking about some of the opposition that she's been getting.
Yeah.
Because of Shevik's involvement. That's the word I want, with Badap and
with the syndicate.
The syndicate,
yeah.
Yes, the printing syndicate.
Yeah.
And this woman who she wanted to talk with somebody at the domicile, and she's like, don't you come into this room, I know you, blah blah blah. And I'm like, but obviously she doesn't. That's yeah, Joan, they don't want to hear that, but that's okay. We get to that point eventually after I wait for the frustration to dissipate. I'm just like, so anyway. And then Badap's point, we're only just beginning to feel what it's like to be revolutionaries. And it isn't comfortable. I'm like, yes, it's not comfortable.
Which is kind of the point, yeah.
That's why it's so much easier to just like go along with it and accept the misery, I guess. It's, even if it sucks, it's easier. And some people understand, Tucker said, with determined optimism, which
again, a great,
honey, bless you. Yes, it's just like, it's okay. It's not everybody hates us.
Krusty is coming. Krusty is coming. Krusty is coming.
You're a dork.
Thank you.
The syndicate is cutting awfully close to the basic societal bond, the fear of the stranger. There was a young fellow there today, openly threatening violent.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. It's only 7. Okay, propertarian. Ooh. There might have been the violent. Is it reprisal or reprisal?
Reprisal.
Okay, thank you. It's been a long time. And then, You know who she is, Dop. Who she is? Chev never told you? Well, he doesn't talk about her. She's the mother. Chev's mother. And I think it works there because it's used as a choice for emphasis.
Well, and like there's the whole no personal pronouns thing is so ridiculous. And it's like, of course, yeah, how else are you going to say that? Like, these people are such pretentious assholes. Like, we're going to be so free, and we're not going to be, no one's going to claim ownership over anybody else, and we're not even going to use personal pronouns to claim any possession in any sense. Like, fuck you.
It's a constructed language, but it's constructed with possessive nouns and possessive pronouns that they are supposed to then choose to not use.
To not use, yeah. It's so dumb.
Because there are languages that don't have that just express that concept in different ways. You know, the woman who birthed him. Because, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, that's part of his backstory is she's not really his mother.
Yeah, right. They don't have like what we would think of as like a parental child relationship. Yeah.
Parental filial relationship. Yeah. No. I mean, she is just the woman who birthed him. But at the same time, they still, you know, she's still the mother. And what the mother means is, I mean, and it's we don't really see any other examples of that, of a normal, the mother, the father, where the kid's basically raised by the nursery.
Right.
And then visits with the family, you know, occasionally, but eventually really goes on to have more of a relationship with their peer group or the people that they choose. Their chosen family ends up mattering more. I mean, Badop is much more connected to Tokvar and Shevik and Sadik and Pilun. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Them, you know, than to whoever was related to him, you know. So I mean, clearly there are examples of that, but that's not the story Le Guin's choosing to tell. And so Rulong seems like in this story, she's the anomaly because we see the closeness between Shevik and Tokvar and their family,
right,
as well as between Shevik and his father. But in their society,
it's normal. Yeah.
You know, they're the unusual ones, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then interesting when, Dot pulls up on it. He says she's been waiting for him to show up. She knows he's the soul of the group, and she hates us because of him. And I underlined that and wrote, "Does she?" I mean, but Dot obviously thinks so. Like he's convinced. He's saying this energetically. He's like, da, 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 da. He really thinks so. That doesn't mean he's right, you know, but it feels like he's seized on this as that's it. That's why she doesn't like us. It's because, you know, she's this estranged mother and da, da, da. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's probably a combination of both. I mean, she doesn't seem, you know, she and Shevik have a distant, strained relationship anyway. And the fact that if Shevik is involved with the syndicate and is trying to convince people that they should, you know, broaden communication with Urus, and she's like dead set against that, then those two things will kind of, you know, they'll sort of amplify each other. Like, you know, of course my no good rotten kid is, you know, trying to get us to bring Erasti here, figures, you know what I mean? And it'll sort of, they'll feed off each other, you know?
Yeah. Ready Amosing, I'm curious about that. I don't know enough about Dostoevsky's The Possessed. But I mean, a lot of it has reminded me of Marie Kondo, you know, but
yes.
The idea that, you know, this, you don't need all this stuff, and the stuff that you do have, you don't need to be like attached to it, you know?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like the idea that you should own your stuff shouldn't own you.
Yes, exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. So Shevik and Sadek come in. Sadek was 10. So I was thinking about that because I came back to that actually. I was like, okay, so how old is she at this point? So she's 10. So she's well, because I was thinking, from some of the things that happened later that she's like 12, 13. But she's younger than that. So she's 10 at this point. And so Chevik's talking about, some of his experience with Sybil, and Tokver goes off. After all the slander after all the slander he spread about you and the lies about the principles being stolen from him and not telling you that the Erasti gave you that prize, and then just last year when he got those kids who organized the lecture series broken up and sent away because of your crypto-authorian influence over them, you, an authoritarian? That was sickening, unforgivable. And my note says, excellent expository dialogue. Because that's what it is. I mean, it's an as you know speech.
It totally is.
It's an as you know speech. But it's so good because it totally makes sense in context that she would say this. Like, it doesn't feel forced, like she's telling the reader this, and it's just structured as it makes sense, which
absolutely.
And so,
well, and it's another mark of to me the most impressive part about the book, which is just how well written it is. I mean, you're right.
She know what she's doing.
Oh, absolutely. She's a brilliant writer and a very skilled writer, and I mean, the part of it is it's totally an as you know speech, but sometimes. But the thing is, like, sometimes you need to put one of those in there. That's not always a bad thing. I mean, it's a trope, but it's not. I mean, if you do it badly, then it can come across as clangy and cliched and stick out like a sore thumb. Like, oh Jesus, like that was total exposition. But if you do it well, because like honestly, in real life, we have conversations like this. There are times in real life when you will say something that the person you're talking to already knows. But you just need,
Although, in our family, my mom, I do this too, but I try not to. Like we've gotten better about it. My mom is especially egregious about saying, "You remember so and so?" And I'll say no, and she'll like explain like who this person is. I'll be like, "Yes, I know what you're saying." I
still don't remember them.
And she'll continue to explain who this person is. I'm like, okay, I've said I don't know this person. It's okay that I don't know them. Please, whatever story you're explaining this person for, go ahead and tell it. Yeah. I don't know this person.
Please just tell the goddamn story.
Oh my goodness. And then a little bit later when she says, he's been so squalid for so long. Circle that, but great word.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I just loved it. And then Sybil has offered Shevik a post.
Yes.
Which, quote, he says, it's an autonomous post. I could go on with the research I'd been doing. And the purpose of giving me the post was, to facilitate access to experimental equipment of the Institute and to the regular channels of publication and dissemination, the PDC press, in other words. And Tokver, it's interesting. She says, why then you've won, Tokver said, looking at him with a queer expression. So it's like how she's looking at him, and the description of the expression, I mean, it's not, astonishment. I mean, there's some astonishment and surprise in it and a little bit of wonder, like how she's looking at him, but the point is that it's strange coming from her. Like it's a sharp change. Like she's like, wait, oh, holy Nikes. And then she says, they'll print what you write. And I underlined that, but I circled the you. Only him, not the rest of the syndicate.
Right.
His stuff. And I mean, that's,
and that's part of what Badap is kind of getting at, because
Yes.
because Takfur sort of interprets it as an act of capitulation from
Yes.
Sabul. She's like, aha, he's finally giving in. You've won.
And Bap's like, there
Yeah,
are
it's like
walls behind the walls. Don't push them.
exactly.
Sucker. And Shevik's like, oh no.
No, because
I've won only if I accept the posting. Sabul's
Yeah.
offering to legalize me. Yeah, we know that ain't gonna fly with Shevik, Mister. He's offering to make me acceptable according to the law.
yeah,
He's letting me follow the rules. He's changing the rules to make me acceptable.
Yeah, Mister. To follow any rule is to submit to tyranny. I did that.
Yeah.
Like,
He says he recognizes the reason he's doing this in order to dissociate me from the syndicate. And then I didn't understand why he says, don't you see that? Or I guess he's asking for confirmation, but I'm like, that it seemed redundant. Don't you see that as his motive, Dop? And Dop is like, yeah, that's like why I was saying there's walls behind walls. I'm like,
yeah, I just said it.
yeah. Were you not listening to me? I'm sorry. I interrupted your pontificating. My bad. And then so they talk about it, and Shevik reassures him, I'm not leaving the syndicate, Badop. And Dop lifted his head and said after a minute, no, I know you're not. And I said, why the pause? I honestly don't know why he paused there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Maybe Badop thinks that Shevik might. And he had to sort of, think about it. Like, he didn't. I mean, if it was something that he had no doubt about whatsoever, then you think he would have answered right away and said, "Oh no, I know you're not." But he had to kind of, think about it. Or maybe there's a part of him that thinks like if he were in Shevik's shoes, maybe he would be thinking about taking the offer.
Yeah.
Because it's probably not, he does have, if Sabul is reaching out to him, he does kind of have Sabul in an inferior position. I think Badap is right that Sabul, it's not just, that there's more to it. There are more strings attached to it. There are more ulterior motives, let's say, than Sabul is probably being open about. But at the same time, it is Sabul saying, hey, you want to come back to work? You want to come back to the Institute? That's, there are.
He may be taking a moment to think about, how would it be possible to use this to our advantage, and if so, how could we?
Right.
So they go out to like the cafeteria, and they're hanging out, and some of them there are people who join them at table, and but Badop still feels like they're separate. It says, he felt that around them there was a circle of silence.
Yeah.
They and the people who choose to associate with them are being ostracized.
Yeah, that's definitely, because that's why Takfur is getting shit where she works. And then we find out soon enough that, they're not the only ones.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a quibble of mine.
Yes.
Pillin sat in a high chair, and she's exercising her teeth on a piece of holland bread and her voice in song. Oh, Mathery Bathery, she proclaimed. Abbery, abbery, abberdabbin. Doesn't work like that. Kids, it's not correct as far as language development. Kids develop full words before they get to those THs. That particular phoneme is really difficult.
That's true.
Yeah, and I just literally jumped out at me. One of the things I feel pretty confident about, and I'm not even entirely sure why, and people have commented on, is I guess in the Batman fanfic that I did, that last chapter, you've got, God, what did I even call her? Baby Moana.
What did you call the
what did I call her?
Call the Zia.
Zia, yeah. Zia, yeah, she's a little munchkin. And I felt very confident in how I wrote her. And I always feel confident writing kids. I ain't got kids. I have no idea why I feel confident and why people seem to think I write kids well, especially in their dialogue and their action. I mean, the dialogue mostly is the big one that people say. I have no idea why I can write developmentally appropriate stuff. I did teach 4-year-olds for 1 year, but like, she's not, she's younger than that. And like, I don't know why I'm so confident about this is the way language develops. I don't know, but I'm just like, that was like, nope, that's not right.
Yeah.
I was like, no, everything else is so good. But it's really, and I don't know, man. Ready, I'm saying a lot of the linguistical stuff has been, and I think part of that also may be, like when they do shift, that's why I've sort of questioned whether that shift into using personal possessive pronouns and then possessive nouns was Le Guin getting careless, or whether it was the characters slipping, because the language actually does have those words in it and that structure. In terms of, linguistically, it's very interesting. And so thinking about that has been one of the fun things about the story, like the way that they describe things and some of the differences. So they get ready. They go to take Sadik back to the dorm, and they go back to the learning center, and Bedap and Shevik go with Sadik, and they're all kind of talking together, and they just walk right past, and they're like, "Oh, hey, kid's gone. Oh, that's where she lives now. Whoops." And they go back, and then that's when she says, "Can I stay in the room tonight?" Can I stay? She doesn't call it home.
No.
Can I stay at home? But the description there is just freaking beautiful. Sadik's delicate long face quivered and seemed to fragment.
Yeah.
They don't like me.
They don't like me because of you.
Her voice becoming shrill with tension, but even softer. Oh my goodness gracious. Bless. Yeah, Dylan, but I mean, like in terms of like toddlers, I have next to no interaction.
Right. Hopefully teaching high school doesn't give you any insight into writing toddler speech.
Like baby speech. And then so she just busts up sobbing. And I also pointed out, this is when I went back and started looking, because it says she was too old, too tall for him to pick up.
Yeah.
And I underlined that, and I went back, and then I don't know. Let me see. It's right here. Can you see what I wrote?
Oh, at 10?
Nope. As a grown man, even one who has been nearly starved at some point, grown man can pick up a 10-year-old child.
Oh, yeah.
Who is not particularly large. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, you can pick up a 10-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You can. Yeah. Nuh-uh. Yeah. I'm just like, okay. I'm just like, I'm accepting this for the purpose of the story, but yeah. Oh, and then late, she's just like, she says, "I know it isn't agreeable for you and Tucker to have me overnight." What? Huh? Where'd you get that idea? Because you want privacy. Adult couples need privacy. He's like, the baby's there. The baby doesn't count. Well, then neither do you. You're here and it's okay. And she's like, but I'm just like, it's okay that you're here. We like having you.
So shut the fuck up.
Just everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's a nice scene. It's a nice moment in that scene. Yeah.
This is what pillin' on the mother's lap. Like, that one broke me. Because we can't say her mother.
No, of course not.
Have an apostrophe S on it. Like, okay, but I think that puts in with what Emerlion said something earlier about body parts. Like,
yeah,
it's a little consistent with that body parts get possessive pronouns. Like, it's okay then. I'm like, then you're being inconsistent. So okay, I can whichever.
Yeah.
But okay. Either way, I was just it it jolted me out of the narrative because I noticed that and I was like, just the juxtaposition there made it.
It's like, just say her mother, you fucking lunatics. You fucking pretentious dipshits. Just say her mother. It doesn't mean she owns her.
It shouldn't, but
You
I mean,
fucking assholes.
That's the way people in our society act. Like you own your children. Like you have some sort of duty to blood relations that you don't have to other.
You're absolutely right, but it's not it's not because of the language. I mean, I think of my mother as my mother. Doesn't mean that she belongs to me. I mean, lots of people, not everybody has fucked up, abusive expectations of family members just because we use possessive language figuratively to describe our relationships,
So who's Eris?
I think that's a typo. I think that means I think he's saying Urus.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Joe, that's another possible point. But yeah, just the way the language is structured is
they've been contaminated by Erasti language, by their flagrant use of possessive pronouns.
Just like they're just talk for ask for details, and Shives like to look just not good right now. Just like, what you mean?
I don't want to talk about it.
And Terzel's the big sister in the dorm, and she says, Shevik, and then Shevik steps forward and says, she says Shevik is a traitor. Sadik is an egoizer. You know what she says, Tokver, and that just comes across. His eyes were blazing. Oh.
Well, yeah, because Tokver's experienced it too.
Yeah.
At work, they all have. They've all been, catching a lot of flack.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, John. That was kind of my and it gets into art, to what extent does art shape society, and to what extent does society shape art? There's flow there. But yeah. And Reddy Amsing saying, and as an example of, the way that this society can be superficial, that some people are all too ready to be leaders and followers and to go back to hierarchy, but they're true Odonians, so.
Yeah, and as we've said, many times before, and as we've said already in this episode, I mean, it is, she doesn't present Anaris as an ideal society. But sometimes it's some. Go ahead.
It leads itself very well to this, to having these kinds of
to talking about it. Yeah. Well, I mean, and one of the and again, this is a mark of, I think, how well she avoids being didactic is that like Reddy Aim Singh's observation there about she deploys that the very, very conscious, willful avoidance of possessive pronouns as an example of ostentation. It's not always clear if she's intending to do that or not. I mean, I personally, like, most of the time when I think that's just my own bias against what I consider their bullshit principles coloring my interpretation of it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's hard. Huh?
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I do.
Do you?
I do. Oh, I do. I know you think the principles are nonsense.
Yes.
Steve.
That's what that is the school appropriate way of saying it.
Da-da-da.
But so it's difficult for me to tell if that's just my own bias against their principles making me, read that and go, oh, these fucking people, or if that is part of the writer's intent to say, some of them are kind of jerks about it. You know what I mean? Like it's difficult to tell.
It does. It influences, Jim McClory's point that the decision to not use language like that matters. And then also
Sure.
the practice. I mean, I think I don't know if I've talked about it on your channel before, but I know I think I've mentioned it to you, that, and I know I've mentioned it, to other friends of mine, that I had been in the habit of, when I forget things, it's very frustrating for me. And I had been in the habit of just like letting loose on myself. And then I was told that, not to do that. That nobody should talk to me that way, including me. And so I've made a deliberate effort to stop. And I've noticed that maybe coincidentally, but maybe not, I've become more comfortable and confident in who I am.
Yeah.
So
which is great. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea that
it affects your mindset, like
as much as thought shapes language.
Yeah.
And so kind of what so, going on what some random geek was saying, that he doesn't think it needs to go as far as changing language. Changing language may not be deliberate necessarily. If you change the thought, you change the language. Although in this case, we are told that it was done deliberately. But, I mean, language changes over time. It does. That's
absolutely it does.
So, yeah. So I mean, it's just, but it's a lot. It's been really enjoyable to go through and explore, both, not just what the author intent, because they're, and I was saying this with poetry when we were, talking about this, the author's intent, the poet's intent isn't the only thing that matters, because we bring our own experiences and our own society into our experience of the text, and that matters too. And so we can say, do we think this is what the author intended, and why, and what purpose were they going for, and why, why does that matter, and what does that matter to us? And, looking, just sort of exploring through it and exploring the ideas, and, there's value and even enjoyment just in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And so she, she says, she essentially says, I was just hoping that it would get better, but they make each other meaner. Yeah. And I'm like, oh boy.
Aren't kids great?
Kids are people too, everybody. The innocence of childhood, it's not really a thing.
There's not so much.
They're just in some cases less practiced at, they're less effective at whatever it is they do. They don't have as much experience.
Just thinking how much better they'll be at being mean to people if allowed to continue developing in that direction unchecked. Yeah.
So, eventually, Sadek and gets tucked in beside Pillin, and they go to sleep. And they talk about the essentially the fact that their family is abnormal and has been this whole time. Like they've been sort of, because raising Sadek when Shevik was away, Takfur was being accused of being propertarian. That she was, so I mean, it's been their whole family has been abnormal like the whole time, and
raising your kids like a couple of weirdos.
Yeah, what the heck? Like you own the kids or something. What in the world? But some of Shevik's statements stood out to me. If we choose to give the child the intensity of individual love, we can't spare her what comes with that. The risk of pain from us and through us.
Yeah.
And Takfur says it isn't fair. And I'm like, oh, honey, Life's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then later on the next page for me, they're talking about the relative danger to them, and essentially Chevik saying that he feels responsible, and he's worried about endangering them more by being with them.
Yeah.
Staying posted there. And she's like, oh, well, of course, there's no danger for you. And he's like, I've asked for it. And so essentially he's expressing his responsibility, but it made me think of Bidap's remark earlier that when you ask for it, you know more of what to expect.
Right. If you make the trouble, you're ready for
yeah.
it, or more ready for it anyway. Yeah.
And you sort of know, you kind of know who to expect it from, who's been, side-eyeing you and sipping the tea and that kind of thing. And of course he does say, I don't feel the same about your danger as I do mine. And she says, altruist. But, it's just like, but I'm worried about you. And it's because he cares.
Yeah.
He's feeling proprietarian towards her. He wants her to be okay and their children to be okay.
Proprietarian bastard.
Oh,
What?
And then she says, go to Uris. He's like, what? She's like, go to Uris. They want you there. He's like, I don't need prizes and rewards. And she says, no, but you do need, and I think she's saying this about him, but I think it applies to everybody. Mm-hmm. You need appreciation and discussion, and students for him, because that's part of his work. But, people need to know that they have value.
Yeah.
People need purpose. And then I circled appreciation. I put to have someone acknowledge that you're right.
That is totally what you need, my dear.
I don't actually.
You don't need it.
Need it.
But it helps. It makes it easier for you to thrive. Yeah, exactly. You like it a whole bunch.
A whole lot. Oh boy.
I mean, really, who doesn't? Who doesn't like hearing that they're right? I mean, come on.
To have it acknowledged.
Validation, vindication.
I was right. I swear I'm right. Swear I knew it all along. Now I am flawed, but I am cleaning up so well. I am seeing in me now the things I knew were there all along, and I told you they were. Not how it goes.
You rewrote it a little, but you're mostly.
But I just made it more accurate.
You made it. You personalized it.
I made it better.
You made it.
Oh. Man, y'all, I got a comment today, and it just seriously, I was like, oh, I got a comment.
And it was a very nice comment, too.
Very nice comment.
And a very true one, a very accurate one.
I don't want to say that I don't care that it was a nice comment, but it's more important to me that I just have a comment.
Dana, not all attention is good attention.
I understand that, and I don't approve the nasty comments, but I don't delete them right away.
You like
comments? Oh, look, there are people who hate me. Aww.
You like to sit with it. You just like to sit with it for a minute.
I'm so greedy. It's ridiculous, and I recognize that it's ridiculous, but it's still true. And so he talks about with Tucker about whether or not he would be able to come back.
Right. Because that is very much an open question at this point.
Yeah.
And he even talks about, that they could even shoot down the ship. If enough people, if they persuaded defense of the danger, they could shoot down the ship. Defense? You mean there's a separate group in charge of defending the colony? Sounds like a hierarchy to me.
Only if somebody's in charge of it.
Oh, of course. You
Wars go on.
wouldn't want to have anybody in charge of defense. Lord knows. That would be just disastrous.
That would be a hierarchy, Steve.
Of course. We can't have that.
And we can have explosives.
Yeah, that's that in the very next paragraph. Oh, anybody could, anybody with blasting powder could blow. I'm like, that. Do they have that much blasting powder on this colony? Like, you would need a lot of explosives to shoot a spaceship down.
No.
Like,
Blow up the ship on the ground.
oh, they could. Yeah, I guess. Oh, that's true. But even that, you'd still need a lot of shit. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know how big their ship is.
but of course, I guess
I'm struggling with this, Steve. Exactly how big is a rocket engine?
that's true. We've discussed this recently, and of course, because this is.
Is going to find out, but I don't know.
And because in this society, I guess pretty much anybody could just go to the blasting powder depot and get as much explosive as they want.
Okay.
Great society. God, I'd love to live there.
Steve, I don't think you're being entirely honest.
I'm not. What I'm doing is saying something and meaning the opposite.
There's a word for that.
Is there?
There might be.
There might be. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, and they sort of talk it over, and Takver decides that it would be worth the risk. To the risk of pissing everybody off, the risk of not being able to come back, that it would be worth that risk for Shevik, because Shevik has this little speech where he's like, we have to take the risk. Like, not taking the risk, part of our, philosophy underlying our society is that we have to take risks, because if nobody take risks, then we'll never evolve. And
I think that's why she says it would be worth it. It's not because his logic convinces her, but because she knows he needs it.
Yeah.
Because it matters to him, it's worth the risk to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she's willing to risk losing him because he needs to do this. He needs this.
Well, and there's a lovely callback to a scene they had in an earlier chapter where she says to him, "You always come back," because that's sort of how she summarizes their relationship. You always come back. And that's what she says to him. Like, she's not worried about him going to Urus and, not being able to return, because you always get to where you're going and you always come back. Yeah, it's nice.
And then they have that romantic moment, and he follows it up with, "Don't be stupid, Tucker."
Yeah, well, I love it. And it's a great use of dramatic irony, because, he's like, "I'm not going to Urus," which, yeah, he is. We know he is.
Obviously.
Like,
and I will say her question: what's the good of an anarchist society that's afraid of anarchists?
Right.
And she, she gets kind of purple. We'll if our society is becoming is straying from its ideals, well, then we can just go on our own.
Yeah.
And make our own. And
we'll go live in the mountains
beyond Anaris.
Yeah.
A new beginning. How's that? He's like, there you go.
Beautiful.
Poetry. That was from Treasure Planet, by the way.
Good movie.
Good movie.
Good movie.
And Emma Thompson as Captain Amelia is, the cast is just fabulous.
David Hyde Pierce.
What did I call those that crew of yours? I don't even remember what she says, but the Mr. Arrow recites it back to her, and she's like, "There you go." I don't believe I like this crew of yours very much that you hired. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off on that. It's such a good movie. If you haven't seen Treasure Planet, you should see it.
It's a good movie.
It's really good. And I underline that what you talked about. You always get to where you're going, and you always come back. But it's also a reference to what he talks about in his theory of simultaneity.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is just beautiful. It's just beautiful writing. The way it ties together like that.
When you get back.
Yeah.
You can go back, but the back that you get to isn't the same. It's not the same home.
You can always come back, but you can't come back all the way. Or you can't go home again, if you prefer.
Something like that.
Which is one of the most tragically true statements I think ever devised by human beings. It sounds so simple, but it's so true. And when you realize how true it is, it's like, oh shit, that sucks. You can't go home again.
No, but you can be home.
You can, yeah, that's true. That's true.
And you can always find home.
Hopefully. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, so that's the end of chapter 12. Good chapter, I would, huh?
So close.
We're all one chapter to go. One chapter to go. Good chapter. Very, very character driven, which I appreciated. I still find myself, liking Shevik. Like I like Shev. I like Badap too. Like I think Badap is. I don't know if I would say he's my favorite character because I feel like Shevik. I mean, but then again, in most stories that I really like, the protagonist is my favorite character. Like I'm usually not terribly adventurous when it comes to choosing favorite characters. Like when people ask me, like, "What's your favorite Star Trek character?" It's one of the protagonists. Like it's one of the lead protagonists. Like, huh?
But which one?
Probably Cisco.
I figured.
So probably, yeah, Cisco. Because, Shevik is the protagonist of the novel. Shevik's my favorite character. And he is, he's a good character. And I like him. I like him a lot, despite thinking that, he's full of shit when it comes to anarchism.
Hold back, Steve. Tell us how you.
That's the thing is like, I like him as a character. I like him as a person. I think he has a lot of admirable traits. And not only that, he's a very sympathetic character. Like we've talked about from as soon as we started reading this book together, like you just like him. You root for him. You want him to be okay.
So today was Friday, so I answered my questions, and one of the questions was, so I have my homeroom students. One of the things they do is on Wednesday, they each write down one question for me, and it has to be school appropriate, has to be something they asked before. And so it's kind of challenging, for them to think up something new. One of the questions was, what kind of books do you like? And I said, books with characters that are consistent. They stay, consistent to who this person is.
Right.
They are, how did I put it? They are purposeful. Like they have something that they want, they're going for it. They're not passive.
Yeah. Active.
They have a good heart.
Yeah. That's
that, and I think that is definitely all three of those are true for Chevik.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. He definitely has a good heart. I mean,
yeah, and that's what I said. I was like, look, I have more than enough of people being crappy to each other in real life. I do not need that in my fiction.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it to me that brings it home to me is like, honestly, if he were not such a likable and compelling character, even though the book for the most part is not didactic at all, even with that, and even with how beautifully written so much of it is, like if Shevik were not such a compelling and sympathetic protagonist, all the anarchist shit would probably be so off-putting to me that I just wouldn't want to read the book, because I mean, it just, I don't buy it. I think it's silly. I think like the most, and this is, it's like a sci-fi fantasy novel. The most unbelievable, fantastic part of it was there's a line of it that we didn't really cover in this chapter, where I think Rulag says it, where she's like she's really like getting on their syndicate and talking about like how they're doing something that's like it's really dangerous and it's it's against the will of the people, and she says something like, for the first time since our colony was founded, there's a group of us that is acting against the common interest, and I'm like, that okay, like this is a fantasy. Because you can't tell me that wouldn't happen within like 5 minutes in an actual society like this. Like it just, I don't buy it at all. And I mean, much respect to everybody watching who are anarchists who disagree with me vehemently. Like I think, I mean, but I don't buy it. I think it's silly. And, all of the preaching and the proselytizing and the breast beating of all of the anarchist characters in it that are talking about how great their fucking society is and how great their principles are and how they know true freedom and following rules is tyranny. It's like, oh my fucking God. But even with all of that, like, I find Shevik to be an incredibly sympathetic character.
I think you're strongly underestimating the power of opt-in.
The power of opt-in.
Yeah, the people who I could potentially see it happening within like the next generation. But to say as soon as they get there, there's people going to be like, well, I'm going to do my own thing. No, these are people who went through great personal sacrifice and knew that they were approaching hardship and gave up on, as we are told in the previous chapter, there aren't actually any people starving or like homeless.
Right.
The people who are protesting solely on principle, just on principle, not because they have nothing left. They got stuff to lose and they're still protesting. And so that means that the people who left relatively comfortable lives behind on those principles. And so it just seems like to me, like, I don't think it would happen as soon as you're saying. But the question, yes, there's going
maybe
to
not
be
with, but I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable.
Yeah. And I think, yeah.
And also, and we've talked about this,
especially given that as anarchists, they have a focus on organizing and working together. And that means, you're organizing and working together for this thing you want. And this group over here is organizing and working for the thing that they want. And those two things might be in opposition.
Right.
And that's totally compatible with anarchistic principles, with Odonian principles. So, no, I think Rulag's just wrong. It's just like literally within the context of the story that she's just wrong.
Well, I don't think we're obviously not supposed to side with her. I mean, I don't think.
No, but beyond that, I think just it's. I don't think it's empty rhetoric. Like I think, but I think she's talking out her butt to some degree, and she's good, and she's usually able to support what she says. So when she ventures a little bit past that, her reputation kind of protects her. So I'm kind of with you on this is the first time this has happened. Just because she says it doesn't mean that it's actually
That's true. Well, it's a little bit like there's a line we haven't gotten to it yet, and anyway, we depending on how long we keep doing Trek reluctantly, but there's there's an episode in, I can't remember, I think it's in the 3rd season of Deep Space Nine, where Cisco and Quark are like on a camping trip, and with Jake and Nog, and they're having an argument because Quark like calls Cisco out for his anti-Ferengi bias, and he's like, you humans, you like to shit talk our society. You talk about like how all we care about is money, and we're we have all these like oppressive beliefs about women and blah blah blah. And he kind of throws it back in Cisco's face, and he says, "But you know what? Look at your own history. Look at all the bloodshed and genocide and slavery that is in human history. There's none of that in Ferengi history, and you have to sort of question as to whether we're meant to believe Quark is that's true when he says that, and that's just Star Trek just saying, hey, that's just, I know it doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it is. Or if we're meant to take that as Quark being an unreliable source. And he's just, the proud Ferengi sort of parroting the company line about like, oh yeah, all we care about is commerce, but we never had slaves, as though that's like a point of pride with Ferengi, when that's like, you think about it for 5 minutes, you're like, wait a minute, that can't possibly be true. Like Ferengi, you can't tell me Ferengi never had slaves. That's like, of course they must have at some point.
There's all kinds of profit in it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know how much money you can make if you ain't got to pay people?
But it's one of the, I mean, they're a fictional society, so if the show says they never had slaves, then they never had slaves. It's all made up.
It's not the show saying that. It's one of the characters.
Exactly. Exactly.
And, I mean, those are always interesting, ideas and ideas to explore and conversations to have. So, hopefully we get to that point. I mean, it sounds like definitely something worth exploring. It's
a good episode.
Talking about that you're the character you tend to gravitate to the most is almost always the protagonist. I don't know if I haven't been reading a lot of fiction lately, but going through Pride and Prejudice, liking the protagonists, I won't say less and less, but pretty steadily less over the course of the novel. And like one of the most minor characters, Mary Bennett.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, and that's one of my points here. And I've actually started pulling up some stuff. Like literally, I've put some books on my to-read list. I'm like, okay, let's find out if this is what happens. There's a fair amount of post Pride and Prejudice, of course, because it's in the public domain, so people can like publish stuff. But essentially published Pride and Prejudice fanfic. And a fair amount of it. And there's also an article I actually wrote to email the I did that today. Emailed the professor who wrote it about the post, I guess in the last 10 years or so, the proliferation of books and works and fan works that center on Mary Bennett. And her article is posited on the idea that it's in response to the way that her character has been portrayed in film and TV adaptations. And I'm like, that's interesting because I'm finding her the most interesting character, and I haven't seen any of those like at all. But I didn't say that. I just said, thanks for writing that article. It's really interesting to read. But yeah, that was pretty interesting because she's the one I've pulled to the most. And then of course the male character that I've pulled to the most is Mr. Collins, who's another one that you're not supposed to like. So I don't know. They feel so judged, and I'm just like, but there are these small hints as to if you think about them as people, which I realize that the book is somewhat satirical and it's a critique of their society, but at the same time, the characters have to be recognizable as people. And so if you look at it from that perspective, the characters who are strongly judged become much more interesting and intriguing, I think. But, so yeah,
it is interesting because I mean I edit them for you, so I've watched all of your Pride and Prejudice reaction videos, and
there's a lot of
well, and it's like I remember you in the most recent one that you did, you mentioned how like Mary is your favorite character, and like at this point in the book, it's like she's hardly even in it.
Yeah, it's like I keep going on. Oh, and in the next one that I'm writing notes on for, I noticed that because Elizabeth has gone to visit Charlotte, now Collins, who had been Charlotte Lucas, her next door neighbor / bestie, and she's gone to visit Mr. Collins and Charlotte for like a month and a half, and anyway. And Charlotte Lucas's younger sister, Maria, has come along. And on the way back, they stop off at London and pick up Jane, who has been staying with one of their aunt and uncles in London, but Mr. Bingley hasn't come to visit. And then they go down to meet their father's carriage is going to pick them up and take them back to their home. And so they go down and they meet up with Kitty and Lydia. And it says the three women. And so I'm like, okay, so this is Jane and Elizabeth and Maria Lucas. And then there's literally no mention of Maria Lucas until after they get home to Longbourn. And it says that the Lucases came over to like visit with them and pick up Maria. And I'm like, because like for like 4 or 5 pages, I'm like, who was the third? Is Maria here or not? I can't tell. Because not only does she not say anything, there's no reference to her. And then I think I have this in my notes. I'm like, oh, maybe it's the name. Like Maria, she's the Mary in her family. Just like it's a very unfortunate name if you're an Austen character, I guess. I don't know. So John, thanks for that description of what's going on. So we're talking about, okay, so y'all talking about Ferengi.
We're apparently done talking about the Dispossessed for the week.
Yeah, well, we got through the chapter, so
yeah,
now
and so one chapter to go, and then let's remind everybody that after we finish the Dispossessed, our next book, and I don't know, we haven't decided if we're going to take a little break or if we're just going to keep going with the regular schedule, but our next book, we are going to keep doing Readaway after we finish the Dispossessed, and the next book is The Other Westmore.
Yep.
So if anybody wants to read along, and it's a lesser known book than the Dispossessed, so if anybody wants to keep reading along with us while we talk about it, you have about a month at least, if not longer, but coming up, soonish, to get your own copy from the library or to buy it or whatever. So.
Well, I really enjoyed discussing this chapter with you.
And I always enjoy discussing it with you.
I know. I mean, I didn't mean for that to sound like arrogant, but I just wanted to reinforce. Yes, I had
preen.
I don't know if anybody can see that because
no, you have to. Yeah,
I have to say something and then preen. So I said something.
There you go. Perfect. Anyway, do you want to remind people of your YouTube channel?
I have a YouTube channel, and there was a video that went up, so I was just Pride and Prejudice. That's on there. As well as videos about like grammar and writing and literature and stuff, and teaching in general. So I'm a teacher, so it's kind of about that. And I really, really, really like comments. They don't even have to be anything meaningful. I promise. I just really like getting comments.
Please, somebody give this woman a comment.
Not on this video. This video's okay too. You can leave me the one here and then one over there. And like, click the bell and subscribe. I'm like, I mean, sure.
Comment.
I'm not really concerned with my subscriber, follower, viewer count, or likes and dislikes. Okay, not really concerned.
You're not obsessively following your analytics. You just want them comments.
I like seeing the different squiggles. I don't really understand them at all. I know they mean things. But like when people say things, that's interesting. Squiggles are just like, oh, look at the line.
Oh my god! I
do know that much.
I just had this visual of like you're here standing over my shoulder and I'm showing you like some analytic thing for my YouTube page and I'm like, here, check this out, this is cool, and you're just like, oh, squiggles. I'm like, yeah,
like,
sure.
Can you make it a different color, or does it just
exactly? Does it have to be blue? Can it be like purple? Maybe I can't.
Purple is the best color.
I knew you would say that. That's why I said purple.
Daunting.
But yeah, so Dana's YouTube channel
says that I should stop egoizing. No. Such a rebel.
Dana's YouTube channel is linked in the description of this video, and Some Random Geek also kindly put it up in the live chat just now. Also, let's not forget about the charity links.
Dun, da, da.
Absolutely.
Some Random Geek so thoughtfully curates and takes care of
Yes, absolutely. And if you click that link, charitylinks.page, you'll go to a document that has a collection of PayPal links and GoFundMe pages and stuff like that for friends of ours who need a helping hand. So if you can spare a few bucks and you want to help out some folks in need, please click the charity links link and help out some of our friends. We would really appreciate it, and I know they would appreciate it as well. So I will be back on Monday for another conversation stream. My guest will be T1J, and then Dane and I will be
stuff on Monday.
Huh?
You've predicted nerdy stuff for Monday.
Nerdy. Yes, probably. Yeah, we haven't discussed specifically what we're going to talk about, but I'm gonna pitch. Let's talk about nerdy stuff. But really it's up the guests. The guest on the conversation stream has more say, you know.
Has he told you what he wants his charity to be?
Yeah. No, I don't think I've asked.
Well, you should.
I know. I will.
Okay.
I will.
Okay.
I'll ask him. I'll wait till like 5 minutes and be like, by the way, what's your charity? What do you want to talk about? But yeah, and then we'll be back on Wednesday for another Trek Reluctantly. We're watching Firefly. The episode is trash. I don't know. That's the title.
That is so judgmental, Steve.
That's the title.
Oh.
I've never seen it. I don't know if it's trash or not. It's probably pretty good. Judging by the rest of the show, it's
hopefully not too reluctantly.
I'm gonna show you. Good. And also on Wednesday, my next episode of Trek Reluctantly, or Trek Actually. Trek Actually comes out. I made that same mistake on Wednesday. The next episode of Trek Actually comes out as well on Wednesday. I have it written. I'm shooting it tomorrow and editing it between tomorrow and Wednesday, and it's about the depiction of disabled people in Star Trek. And I've done a lot of research on it and tried as a non-disabled person, made an effort to get it right, and hopefully I did.
Probably did. That's okay.
And next, a week from tonight is the next Ask Away. So, and a week from today is also when the next episode of the Ensign's Log comes out. Episode 2 of season 4 with the debut of, I don't think I'm spoiling anything too bad, but the debut of your new regular character.
Regular character. Oh. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And Some Random Geek, yes, I did. And Joe McClory, yes, there is. There is Beep Chair Talk. How are you going to do a video about how disabled people are portrayed in Star Trek and not mention Captain Pike in the Beep Chair?
I would not know at all, Steve.
It is a very prominent and somewhat problematic depiction of disabled. I wouldn't even say somewhat. In many ways, it is a quite problematic depiction of disabled people in Star Trek, and so one of the most.
Quite.
And unfortunately, it's one of the examples because Captain Pike originated in the original series. And then they brought him back, in Star Trek Discovery. And then he's getting his own show now. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is coming out with the Discovery version of Captain Pike as in the lead. His destiny to become a disabled person eventually and end up in the Beep Chair. It's one of the depictions of disability that has actually kind of gotten worse. I mean, it hasn't really, in terms of how his disability is depicted, it hasn't really gotten better with time and growing social.
It's been established. You're working with something that's been established as this is how it is in continuity. And
yeah, it's not just that though. It's not just, it's the way it's depicted. I get into it in the video. But
good. That gives us even more of a reason to watch it and find out.
And also, you know what? Maybe it will be something that the series Strange New Worlds deals with and is able to sort of rehab a little and make that portrayal of a disabled person a little better. But I don't know. I mean, like there's a scene
You're
in an
not holding your breath.
well, it's like I'll be interesting to see how they if they can improve it
Redeem it.
because there's a scene in one of the episodes of season 2 of Discovery where Pike has like a vision of his future in the chair, and it is shot and presented like a nightmare. So being a disabled person is presented as literally a nightmare for this guy. And it's like, I mean, it's just it's way over the top. And it's like, all right, I get it. Nobody who is who doesn't have to use a wheelchair would necessarily want to have to use one in the future. But like,
That is totally not my nightmare.
it's
It's
yeah,
my future, for God's sakes.
yeah. But Ready Aim Sings that Star Trek has really done a lot of groundbreaking work to destigmatize people with shit glued on their forehead. It absolutely has, and we all owe it a great debt for that. So there is at least that. And look, and I found lots of positive or leaning positive portrayals of disabled people in Star Trek. So it's not all just, cringeworthy stuff. Like, but there is some stuff that's like, ooh, that's, But anyway, that's on Wednesday. So, yeah, I believe we're done here.
All right. Well, thanks everybody so much for coming. I've enjoyed it, and I know it. And thanks for those of you who are still here. Thanks for sticking with us through the little technical problems.
Yes.
I'm glad that it got better so that we could continue talking.
Me too. Yeah. So thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. We will see you in 2 weeks for the conclusion.
Yeah, the ultimate chapter.
The ultimate chapter. The ultimate chapter of the Dispossessed. And then on from there for the other Westmore. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for hanging out and talking with us in the chat. And we'll see you next time. Have a good weekend, everybody.